Hey guys, welcome back to another reaction video. Today, it started. Why did it start? Oh my gosh, stop. Today I'm reacting to 101 facts about Europe. We are reacting. I'm joking. These are my two best friends. I have hundreds at home. You know what? Yes, I'm not afraid to admit that I have heaps of stuffed animals. Who cares? Anyway, let's get right into the video. Oh my gosh, I've started again. Hang on. Boom.
Greetings, motherfactors, and welcome to this week's edition of 101 Facts. My name is Sam, and today, this 101 Fact
I want to see what I know and what I don't.
Little bits of yogurt and jam, because it's continental, baby. We're talking about Europe, an absolute blinder of a continent, and I'm not just saying that because I live in it. But when and why did Europe skip 9 days completely and pretended it never happened? Who is the toughest country in the whole of Europe? And how many people accidentally got this video while using their voice search function to look for your rope? Hands up, people. 2 out of 3 of those questions are going to be answered, so prepare for a flurry of languages.
Funny guy.
Lovely drone shots of cities as we go through 101 facts about you.
Talking very quickly.
Number 1. Europe is one of 4, 5, 6, or 7 continents of the world, depending on how you're defining continents. It's either its very own continent, part of Eurasia, that's Europe and Asia, or if you want to be really particular about it, it's part of Afro-Eurasia, which is Africa, Europe and Asia. For the purposes of my own sanity, we'll say there's 7 and Europe's one of those. Happy? Don't care. Number 2. Setting an exact border for Europe is difficult, but it's fair to say that it's bordered by the Atlantic Ocean in the west, the Arctic Ocean in the north, and the Mediterranean Sea to the south. That's a pretty definite border, what with the sea not being a country unless you're Aquaman. Number 3. Third, we've got Asia, which is separated by Europe by the Ural Mountains, the River Ural all the way down to the Caspian Sea, the Mainik Valley to the Sea of Azov and the Black Sea, and last but not least the Turkish Straits, which sounds like a barbershop quartet. Number 4. There are 50 countries in Europe, or at least partially in Europe, or which could be interpreted as European. That doesn't include another 6 countries that are for all intents and purposes independent, but aren't recognised as such by most other countries. The most famous of these is probably Kosovo. Number 5. The biggest country in Europe is Russia, which is no surprise since at 17.1 million square kilometres it's the biggest country in the world. However, only 23% of that sits in Europe. Russia is also the biggest European country by population with 143 million people, but this time the proportions are swapped, and 23% of Russians live in the Asian part of the country. Number 6. Europe is, at 10.2 million square kilometres, actually smaller than Russia. And if you want to be basic, the largest country that's entirely Europe is Ukraine, which comes in at 604 square kilometres. That's more than 6 times smaller than the bit of Russia in Europe. The take home here, basically, Russia big. Number 7.
Russia big.
Europe is also home to the world's smallest country, Vatican City.
I knew
about
Vatican City.
It's home to 825 people, including that Pope guy. Of the 10 smallest countries on Earth, 5 are in Europe. The other ones, by the way, are Monaco, San Marino, Liechtenstein, and Malta. Number 8. 745 million people live in Europe, making it the 3rd biggest continent on the planet in terms of people. Africa is the next largest with 1.3 billion people, and Asia takes the crown with 4.6 billion people. Number 9. Europe also has the 3rd biggest economy of all the continents, generating just over $20 trillion in 2020. North America takes the silver medal with 24 trillion, and Asia is once again in the top spot with 32 trillion. Number 10. Around 15.6 trillion of that European wealth is generated by the European Union, which is a political and economic union of 27 European countries. The EU does not have an official capital, but in practice Brussels in Belgium serves as such. Number 11. Launched on the 1st of January 1999, the euro is the closest the continent has to a standard currency.
Yes, I knew about the euro.
Only 19 countries actually use it, and all of them are inside the EU. Number 19. The origins of the name Europe aren't 100% clear, though there are a couple of theories, except MatPat has nothing to do with them. In the ancient Greek language, Euros, meaning wide, and ops, meaning face or eye, were combined to Europa, which might have been used to describe Europe's shoreline or mainland. Number 13. An alternative version for Europe's origin comes from Greek mythology, where Europa was the daughter of the Phoenician king who was abducted by Zeus. The Greek god, disguised as a bull, took Europa to Crete, and they had 3 kids together. How sweet. Number 14. And the final origin theory comes from ancient Mesopotamia, where Europe is said to have derived their word Eribu, meaning sunset, since from ancient Mesopotamia's view, the sun did set on Europe. Interestingly, the ancient Mesopotamian word for sunrise was Azu, and is also a potential candidate for the origin of the word Asia. Number 15. It's been widely reported that 1 in 10 Europeans are conceived in an IKEA bed, ever since a 2011
What?
poll made the claim. IKEA was said to be investigating in 2016, but it's been 4 years now. Got anything yet, lads? Number 16. Europe is home to one of the 2 double landlocked countries on Earth. Liechtenstein is snugly tucked away between Austria and Switzerland, both of which are also landlocked. FYI, Uzbekistan is the other one, so don't go to either of those places if you like the coast. Number 17. The oldest parliament in the world is known as the Althing and was founded in Thingvellir, Iceland, way back in 930 AD. It met annually until 1798 before being temporarily abolished, but made a comeback in 1845 over in Reykjavik. Number 18. Europe can also claim the world's longest continuously operating parliament, the Tynwald, which sits on the Isle of Man. This self-governing dependency of the British Crown has had a parliament in operation since 979, with no breaks in service. As an aside, by the way, it was also the first national parliament to give women the vote in 1881.
Interesting.
Number 19. And while we're on a parliament flex, the biggest parliament building physically resides in Romania, and it's an absolute whopper. It's 360,000 square metres in area, has 12 stories, 1,100 rooms, and 20,000 parking spaces. It holds the record as the world's heaviest building, 700,000 tons of steel and bronze. With
Why is it so big?
Glass, along with 1 million cubic metres of marble and 900,000 cubic metres of wood. Number 20. Belarus is considered by many observers to be the last dictatorship in Europe. Alexander Lukashenko has been president of the country since 1994, although there were widespread protests against his rule in 2020. Number 21. Only 2 European countries have not abolished the death penalty, Russia and Belarus. However, Russia has hit pause on doing so, and the last execution there took place in 1999. Number 22. The highest and longest mountain range located entirely in Europe, because I knew you were wondering,
The Alps.
are the Alps, which run for 1,200 kilometres, and the highest peak is
Thank you very much.
at 4,809 metres. The Alps are so extensive they run across 8 European countries: Austria, France, Germany, Italy, Liechtenstein, Monaco, Slovenia, and Switzerland.
Dang, okay, I did not know that part.
But wait, because Mont Blanc is not the highest point in all of Europe. That honour goes to Mount Elbrus in the Caucasus Mountains. It stands at 5,642 metres, only 64% as tall as Mount Everest, and technically it's a dormant volcano. Number 24. The only active volcano on the European mainland is Mount Vesuvius, which famously erupted in 79 AD and destroyed
Pompeii.
the Roman city of Pompeii, which gave Kit Harington a movie, so I guess it was worth it. Today, it's considered one of the most dangerous in the world since so many people live nearby. 3 million to be precise, with 600,000 thought to be under serious threat next time it erupts. The last time it did so was in 1944. Number 25.
I just think it's so funny to try and, not funny, fun, to try and guess, like, what he's gonna say. I didn't know, so far I haven't, like, a lot of the stuff I didn't know, but Pompeii, we had to learn it in, I think in primary school. Yeah, we had to do a whole presentation and a whole skit and everything. I had to act like I was being blown up by a volcano. So very interesting. Of course, it's kind of stuck in my head after that. Traumatic experience. Anyway, no, it wasn't that bad. That's just, yeah. Anyway, continue watching.
Jets, though, volcano nerds, we're not done because the most active and biggest volcano in Europe is Mount Etna at 3,320 metres on the island of Sicily.
I did not know that. I
Some of
thought
its
it was
landfall combined
Vesuvius.
CGI effects to make the planet of Mustafar in Revenge of the Sith, so it must have a nice look to it. Nice. Number 26. Sweden, Finland and Norway are in the top 3 countries in the world, if you're a fan of islands. Norway has around 55,000, Finland has 180,000 and Sweden has 267,000. Of those, more than 250,000 Swedish islands, only 984 are actually inhabited, so a boat there is basically essential. Number 27. The world's shortest scheduled flight takes place in the Orkney Islands in Scotland. The 1.7 mile flight between Westray and Upper Westray officially takes 2 minutes, but the record is just 47 seconds.
That's so unnecessary.
Europe's biggest lake can be found in, you guessed it, Russia. Lake Ladoga, located not too far from St. Petersburg, is 17,700 square kilometres. The Vatican City could fit on top of it over 40,000 times, though they probably shouldn't do that. Although they could get a lot more baptisms done. Number 29.
That baby looked
Formation of the
traumatized,
European
bro.
Union dates back to 1957 and the Treaty of Rome, which led to the creation of the European Economic Community. There were 6 founding members: Belgium, France, West Germany, Italy, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Number 30. Only one country has ever left the EU, and that's us, the United Kingdom, which held a referendum on membership in 2016, with 52% of the population deciding to leave. No further comments. Number 31. However, other countries have left the EEC/EU. Algeria, for example, which joined as part of France but then left on independence in 1962. Greenland, which left in 1985 after 53% of the population voted to leave, and in 2012, Saint-Barthélemy, an overseas collective of France, decided to leave too. Number 32. On the topic of Greenland, the largest island on Earth, it's geographically part of North America, but its political connections are European. The island has been part of the Danish Kingdom since
Interesting.
1721 and remains an autonomous territory within that kingdom today. Number 33. The origins of the
I like how he
EU
says
go
the
back
numbers.
slightly earlier to 1951 and the formation of the European Coal and Steel Community, where the same 6 countries who founded the EEC agreed to establish a central authority to regulate their coal industries. This giving up of power by national governments to a bigger organisation is called supranationalism, and it was designed to foster cooperation and prevent war. You know, since there had been a lot of war in Europe up to that point. Number 34. There are 12 states in Europe that still have a monarchy, including the Vatican, whose king is the Pope. Not all the monarchs rule over the kingdoms, as
I didn't know
Kingdoms,
that.
Andorra, Liechtenstein and Monaco are principalities, Luxembourg is a grand duchy, and the Vatican is a theocracy. Number 35. Most of the monarchies in Europe today are, ceremonial, but the Vatican is home to the last absolute monarchy on the continent. He is answerable to no other power in the country. He controls executive, legislative, and judicial powers. He's basically Palpatine. He is the Senate. Number 36. You might associate the feudal system with medieval Europe, and you'd be right to do so. It was very popular back in the day, with landed lords ruling it over their vassals who worked the land for them. Let's just say that wasn't very democratic. What might surprise you is that the system lasted in Europe well into the 21st century. Sark, for instance, one of the Channel Islands, didn't abolish it until 2008. Number 37. In the mid-20th century, areas of mainland Europe faced an epidemic of rabies in its red fox population. The solution, first used in Switzerland in the 1970s, was to airdrop thousands of severed chicken heads with vaccine tablets hid inside them for foxes to eat and vaccinate themselves. Number 38.
You know, that's quite intelligent to put the chicken heads there. Back home we have, I wouldn't say a lot of rabies, but it is relatively common, especially like jackals and stuff. It's not great, but the chicken head thing is quite smart, but then you have to consider, like, the fact that some of the foxes still won't eat them, so it's like, it's not the most efficient method, but I mean, it's pretty clever whoever came up with it. It's probably quite effective.
It was so effective that in the end, 16 European countries took up the method. By the end, the Swiss were dropping 150,000 deaths a year before switching to a different method in 1991. Maybe that's how we all get the COVID vaccine. Number 39. Before we go any further, let's address the elephant in the room. Yes, Europe is also the name of a Swedish band famous for producing arguably the greatest song of all time, The Final Countdown. The 1986 mega hit reached number 1 in 25 countries.
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Number 40. In
Dun-dun-dun-dun.
2005, scientists at the University of Liverpool discovered that 10% of Europeans are resistant to HIV. This 10% carry a genetic mutation that's thought to become more prevalent
That's
after
pretty
the
cool.
plagues of the Middle Ages. Although whether it was bubonic plague or smallpox that was responsible remains up for debate. Number 41. According to Brian Sykes, an Oxford University professor of human genetics, 99% of all Europeans can trace their origins back to just 7 different women. His study, which used 6,000 random samples of DNA, determined that the women arrived in Europe as long as 45,000 years ago. The meaning of life. Most of the world, in fact around 66% of the population, are lactose intolerant and generally lose the ability to drink milk comfortably by the age of 5. That's
What a
not
sad
true in
life.
Europe, though, or those descended from Europeans. In Central and Northern European countries, the opposite is true, and between 70 to 90% of people can enjoy drinking milk long into adulthood. This lactose tolerance only developed around 12,000 years ago, remarkably fast in human evolutionary terms. Number 43. Tsar Simeon II was the last king of Bulgaria and sat on the throne between 1943 and 1946, even though he was just a mere child. When the communists took over the country after World War II, the monarchy was abolished and he lost his title. 45 years later, he won the country's election and was elected Prime Minister instead. Number 44. Who's the best and the toughest out of all the Europeans, huh? Well, despite what you may be thinking,
Russia
French
toughest.
are historically the most successful in European history.
Oh.
According to an historian, Niall Ferguson, out of the 168 conflicts they've fought in, they've won 109, drawn 10, and lost 49. Number 45. The largest city in Europe is, drumroll, Istanbul, with a population of around 15 million people. But the city is slap bang on the border between Europe and Asia, which means some of those people live in the non-European part of the city. Number 46. That means that technically the largest city located entirely in Europe is Moscow, with a population of 12.5 million. Paris, London and Madrid round out the rest of the top 5. Number 47. More than 100 vampire skeleton graves have been found across Bulgaria. The practice, where the dead are buried with iron rods through their chest to prevent them from coming back to life, dates back to the Middle Ages but was practiced as recently as the 1900s. Number 48.
Intrigued.
Otzi the Ice
What?
is perhaps one of the most best preserved mummies ever discovered and certainly one of the oldest, with his remains dating back between 3100 and 3370 BC. When Otzi died at the grand old age of 46, which was old for the time, his body was frozen in ice in the North Italian Alps cap style before being discovered more than 5,000 years later in 1991. Number 49. Otzi has revealed a lot about Copper Age life in the region, including that tattoos must have been really popular since he had around 60 of them. They weren't made using a needle though, but by rubbing charcoal into cuts on the skin. Number 50. Only 4 countries drive on the left-hand side of the road in Europe. They're the UK, Ireland, which was once part of the UK, and Malta and Cyprus, both former UK colonies. They're also all islands. The whole of mainland Europe is right-hand drive. Number 51. The origins of this divide are thought to be connected to France and Napoleon. Right-hand drive became the norm for the French during the Revolution at the end of the 18th century, and then Napoleon went around conquering large swathes of the continent, but not Britain, taking right-hand traffic with him. Over time, the standard spread throughout Europe, except in the parts held by the Brits. Number 52. Question for you, is the Duracell bunny pink or is the Energizer bunny that colour? The answer depends on whether you're European
It's
or
both.
American. Both companies use a pink bunny to sell their batteries, but after a trademark dispute between them was resolved in 1992, Energizer was allowed to use the bunny in America and Duracell got Europe. Number 53. The Queen in a game of chess was created in medieval Europe. Prior to this, the piece was known as the Vizier and had a limited range of movement. Basically, it wasn't very good. According to some historians, the rise of Isabella I to the throne of Castile in 1474 was reflected by making this piece into the all-powerful queen we know today. Number 54.
Wow.
Lions used to roam around
That's so
Europe
weird.
and ancient Greece in particular
Oh.
less than 2,000 years ago. There are numerous references to lions by historians at the time, and the European lion was likely used by the Romans in gladiatorial combat. Number 55. One thing that appeared in Europe was the tomato, which was not native to the continent and was imported from the New World in around 1500. For a few centuries, it had the nickname poison apple, because aristocrats would often get ill and die after eating them. Number 56. This wasn't your classic European superstition though, the upper crust were actually dying because of the tomatoes. At the time, the wealthy used pewter plates to eat off. These contain lead, and when you put an acidic tomato on lead, it changes material into itself. Turns out tomatoes that are contaminated with lead aren't very good for you. Number 57.
Lead
The first smoker in
poison.
history is generally considered to be Rodrigo de Jerez, who brought the habit back to Spain after travelling with Columbus. Upon his return, he was arrested by the Spanish Inquisition, who nobody expected really, for smoking in public and was accused of Satanism because smoke came out of his nostrils. He served 7 years for that. Number 58.
Ah,
The longest place name in Europe and the second in the world is Lampul. This
Whoa there, buddy.
UK, which is in Europe. There's plenty of funny place names in Europe, but thugging in Australia used to be called something that's rude and sounds very similar to that, and they've changed it to thugging starting from the 1st of January 2021. Number 59. Europe changed its calendar in 1582 from the Julian system introduced by Julius Caesar to the Gregorian calendar, introduced by Pope Gregory XIII. The problem with Jules' calendar was that it was 11 minutes and 14 seconds longer than the year, which meant the calendar drifted. Number 630. As a result of switching between the calendars and resetting the drift, it meant that the days between October the 5th through to October 14th, 1582, did not exist. It was first adopted in Italy, Spain and Portugal, but Protestant countries held out for a bit longer. Britain, for example, didn't switch calendars until 1752. Number 61. San Marino can claim to be the oldest republic in the world, with its origins stretching as far back as 301 AD. In 1600, a constitution laying out a parliamentary government was also put into place. Number 62. Almost all of Europe's royal families are distantly related and trace one common ancestor back to King George II of Great Britain and Ireland, who ruled from 1727 to 1760. The 8 royal families of Denmark, Luxembourg, Monaco, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, Sweden and the UK are thus related by one old Georgie boy.
Georgie boy.
Modern humans first arrived in Europe sometime between 55,000 BC and 35,000 BC. By the year 7000 BC, Europeans, if you can call them that, had adopted farming and were living in permanent settlements. Civilization as we know it today was born. Nintendo 64. For those wondering what had happened to the non-modern humans of Europe, the Neanderthals went extinct in the region about 30,000 to 40,000 years ago. Up to 4% of DNA in people of European and Asian ancestry comes from Neanderthals, and this Neanderthal inheritance has been linked to a higher risk of sunburn, greater risk of depression, and increased nicotine addiction. Number 65.
Those are very unfortunate
Early
genetics.
cultures of Europe were the Cucuteni Tripilia, who were knocking around in Eastern Europe from 5500 BC to 2750 BC. They're remarkable for building huge cities with populations of 10,000 people or more. Number 66. What's unusual about the Cucuteni Tripilia is that every 60 to 80 years they would burn their cities to the ground and move on to a new area and build a new one. One theory for this was that they believed in a cyclical world, since their settlements were built in concentric circles and their art was on big circles too. Number 67. Before we move on to the really famous ancient civilizations, let's give a shout out to the Minoans. Sorry, the Minoans, generally considered Europe's first advanced civilization. From around 3000 BC to 1100 BC, the Minoans thrived on the island of Crete. Now sure, they had flourishing trade and their culture inspired the ancient Greeks, but the take home here is that they were rocking flushing toilets, the oldest in the world at 4,000
Nice.
years old. Number 68. The decline of Minoan culture coincided with the eruption of a volcano on Thera, modern-day Santorini, in the 16th century BC. This eruption was supposed to be 4 times more explosive than the infamous Krakatoa eruption of 1883, which in itself was 10,000 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima.
Sheesh.
Number 69. I can do this because we're talking about an ancient civilization and it doesn't feel bad. The result, according to some historians, was that Minoan civilization collapsed after being devastated by the resulting tsunami. Either way, it's believed that the idea of a civilization swept underwater was the inspiration for the Greek myth of Atlantis. Number 70. Speaking of the Greeks, they were the preeminent European civilization over a few distinct eras. First up, you have Mycenaean Greece from around 1600 to 1100 BC. This was the period of the Battle of Troy, and stories of Mycenaean culture were captured in Homer's The Iliad and the Odyssey. Number 71. But all good things must come to an end, and the decline of the Mycenaean Age ushered in a 300-year-long Greek Dark Age. Such was the scale of the collapse that there was no written records of this period. Even their writing system, known as Linear B, completely disappeared. Number 72. The next stage is known as the Archaic period, from around 800 to 479 BC. This rejuvenation of Greek culture saw the first Olympic Games held. In 621 BC, the politician Draco introduced harsher laws to Athens, often carrying the death penalty and giving us the term draconian to this day. And in 508 BC, Cleisthenes introduced democracy to Athens. Number 73. The Classical Greek Age, from around 480 to 323 BC, is bookended by 2 of the most famous events in ancient history. In 480 BC, the Battle of Thermopylae took place, immortalised in the completely accurate film 300, where a Persian army of 60,000 defeated a Greek army of 300. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't 300, it was actually 5,000. Still pretty good. Number 74. In 323 BC, the classic era of Greece came to an end, when Alexander the Great also came to an end, aged just 32. As ruler of the Greek kingdom of Macedon, he created one of the biggest empires in history that stretched from Greece to India. That's 2 million square miles. He was also never defeated in military battle. Number 75. His death ushered in the final period of ancient Greece, which is known as the Hellenistic period, and it lasted up to 30 BC. It was during this period that a new kid on the block showed up to conquer Greece. Its name was Rome, and its victory in the Achaean War in 146 BC meant Greece was now a Roman province. Number 76. Rome itself was founded back in 753 BC and can be broadly divided into two eras, the Republic and the Empire. Does that sound familiar? However, initially it was a monarchy, and the last king, Tarquin the Proud, was overthrown in 510-509 BC, sometime around then. Number 77. To replace the king, the Romans elected two magistrates called consuls on an annual basis. There was also a senate which advised the consuls, and in 451 BC, Rome introduced its first law code, the Law of the 12 Tables, which laid out rules on things like inheritance, debt, property, and the like. Number 78. In 44 BC, the death of Julius Caesar, who had Caesared power and declared himself dictator for life, plunged the Republic into a huge crisis and civil war. The winner of that war was Augustus, the first emperor of the new Roman Empire. Number 79. The Roman Empire reached its zenith on 117 AD, and by this point it included most of Europe. It stretched from modern-day England and Wales through France, Spain and Italy and throughout the Balkans, plus areas of Asia and North Africa. Number 80. The influence of Rome on Europe was huge. Their language, Latin, was the foundation of several languages like French, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian and Spanish, among others. Number 81. Christianity became the official religion of the empire in the 4th century, and it prevailed to modern times. A 2015 survey of 15 European countries found on average 18% of the population were church-attending Christians and 46% were non-practicing Christians. Number 82. The Eastern Roman Empire, based in Constantinople, would carry on until 1453 AD, ruling over modern parts of Turkey, Greece, Italy, North Africa and the Balkans. In the West, however, it collapsed in 476 AD, ushering in what's generally known as the European Dark Ages. Number 83. One of the key players during the Dark Ages were the Franks, and the early ruling dynasty were named the Merovingians. They were renowned for sporting long hair to make themselves seem special compared to their subjects, and a Merovingian who had their hair cut short was not able to rule. Number 84.
That's so
Of course,
dramatic.
the most famous Frank of them all wasn't a Merovingian, but a Carolingian, and his name was Charlemagne. On Christmas Day, 800 AD, he was crowned Holy Roman Emperor, essentially resurrecting the long-lost title of Emperor of Rome. As head of an empire that encompassed France, Germany, the Low Countries, and northern Italy, he oversaw the Carolingian Renaissance that drew heavily on and preserved Roman culture. Number 85. But Sam, enough with all the culture. Where's the death, destruction and war that Europe's famous for? Well, don't worry, I've got you covered, death fans. Let's fast forward to 1347, when 12 ships were docked in the port of Messina. The people on board were covered in huge boils that leaked pus and blood, and a lot of them were dead. That's right, the Black Death, aka the bubonic plague, had just arrived in Europe. Number 86.
Okay, I know about the Black Death, but I don't know a lot about it. I just know what it is. But imagine being alive during these times. Like, it must have actually been wild. Like, imagine being ruler of, like, Europe, basically, if you're the Roman emperor. Like, it's actually madness. The way people lived is actual madness.
The epidemic was over by the early 1350s. 20 million people were dead, around 1/3 of the entire population of Europe.
Oh.
The word quarantine originates from the Black Death, as sailors in the ports of Venice were held on their ships for 40 days, or a quarantine, until it was obvious that they were healthy. Number 87. The Black Death actually came at the start of another death fest, the 100 Years' War, which despite the name actually lasted for 116 years, from 1337 to 1453. It was a dynastic conflict between the royal houses of England and France for control over the French throne. Number 88. Over the course of the war, the English did manage to take control of the French throne, but ultimately they lost the war and all of their French possessions, except Calais. But they did eventually lose that too. A certain Joan of Arc, a peasant girl who believed God had appointed her to lead France to victory, helped turn the tide of the war before being captured and burned at the stake by the English. Number 89. If that wasn't enough 14th century action for you, this was also when the Renaissance kicked off in Europe. This was a huge blossoming of ideas that lasted until the 16th century. We're talking the invention of the printing press, all the artists that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are named after, and coming to the conclusion that the sun was at the centre of the solar system. Number 90. This boom in ideas and critical thinking helped create the conditions for the Reformation, which began in 1517 when a German professor, Martin Luther, put forward his 95 Theses, which challenged the Catholic Church. Whoa. This led to a split in Western European Christianity between the Catholics and the Protestants. Number 91. And Europe is really good at dealing with differences of opinion, and everyone learned to live with each other, which is why there was a little thing called the 30 Years' War between 1616 and 1648. This largely Catholic versus Protestant throwdown led to 8 million deaths, and the resulting Peace of Westphalia is credited with laying the foundations for modern nation
These guys, always war.
and sole responsibility for what happens within those borders.
Ah,
Number 92. If one golden age of ideas wasn't enough, between 1685 and 1815, Europe entered the period of Enlightenment. This was centered on questioning authority and trying to improve human society with rational thought, like the idea of separating church and state, Newton laying down scientific and mathematical genius in Principia Mathematica, and Voltaire arguing that everything could be explained rationally. Number 93. One attempt at trying to improve society led to quite a big change. The French Revolution of 1789 that led to the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, which held that men are born and remain free and equal. It wasn't all good, as during the so-called 10-month reign of terror starting in 1793, a minimum of 17,000 people were executed for opposing this revolution. Number 94. In 1799, the revolution came to an end when a certain Napoleon Bonaparte took over power from 1803 to 1815, and France waged the Napoleonic Wars, dominating much of the continent. It took a huge coalition of nations to stop him, and after 4 million deaths, he was finally defeated and sent to live in exile on the tiny island of St. Helena. Number 95. Not to be outdone, the British had a revolution of their own, only not quite as violent. The Industrial Revolution from around 1760 to 1840 spread across the continent and the world, changing the economy forever. No longer would things need to be made by hand, it was mass production time. Engineers like James Watt and Matthew Boulton introduced steam engines to a variety of industries, and the steam locomotive made its debut in 1804. Number 96. It would be remiss to make a video about Europe and not mention colonialism, with several countries setting out to take over the world, or at least very large swathes of it. It's generally considered to be the
France
Portuguese
and
who got things
Britain.
underway in 1415, when they conquered Ceuta in Morocco. Number 97. Over the next 5 centuries, Europe would go on to colonise virtually every country on the planet, either directly or indirectly. By some estimates, only 5 countries were left untouched by European colonialism: Thailand, Liberia, Japan, and the 2 Koreas. The death toll from European colonialism is estimated to be 50 million people, and that was just in the 20th
oh my
century.
days.
Number 98. When Europeans weren't invading and killing the rest of the world, they got back to doing what they do best,
Sky.
killing each other, which is a really flippant way of saying that World War I began in Europe. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary in 1914 triggered a set of competing European alliances that sparked a global conflict which killed 17 million people. Number 99. The Spanish flu was a global pandemic that started in 1918, which infected 500 million people worldwide and killed between
Remember
20
this
to
one.
50 million people. Now you might think it began in Spain, but you'd be wrong. The first known case originated in the USA, but the flu ended up getting its Spanish moniker as Spain was neutral in World War I, and thus there was minimal press censorship, and so could openly report the deadly pandemic. Number 100. In 1939, Europe went back to war again when Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland and subsequently conquered much of the continent. By 1945, an alliance of Britain, the Soviet Union, the USA, and several other countries had rolled back the Nazi Empire, but not before 60 million people had died in Europe and throughout the world. Number 101. Anyway, that's enough about war, let's talk about a weird cheese. Casu Marzu is a unique cheese from Sardinia that's banned in America and the EU, and you can kind of understand why. This cheese is made by introducing fly larvae into pecorino cheese, letting the larvae hatch and eat the cheese. This makes it soft and you're supposed to eat it before the maggots die. I don't know, why did I end with this? That's 101 facts about Europe. Sorry, let me do that properly. That was 101 facts about Europe. Are you from Europe? Did you learn anything new? Let me know in the comments down below. And hey, while you're down there, click like, please. Go on, do it. And subscribe if you haven't done already, because why haven't you? We all have such fun here. And hark, look, 2 videos on screen, especially for you. Don't believe me? Why not give it a click and I'll see you there. Bye-bye now.
Wow, what a funny guy, bro. Do you know what? I love how he's like, this fact about the cheese, this makes me feel sick, so here's some puppies. What a legend, bro. Because it's making me feel sick as well. I was like, it's a little nasty. What a legend. Oh, my back is so sore. Anyway, I did learn a few new things. There were a lot of facts, so I can't remember every new thing I learned from the 101 facts, especially like the very political, the things about like the Roman Empire and stuff. There's just so many facts there. I can't really remember all of them right off my head, but I did you know, I don't retain information like a freaking artificial intelligence. So, but I didn't know there were lions in Europe, and that was really interesting. And then yeah, the Roman Empire, those guys were and this guy, what a savage, where he's like, well, when Europe wasn't fighting the rest of the world, they got back to fighting each other. Guys, but come on, why are there so many wars? Why are there so many wars in Europe? Like, do people not like each other? Is it that serious? But I also like it's very you know, like, because when you watch a long video, like if you're like me, very easily distracted. Like I'll just see something moving in the corner of my room, like, oh, and I forget that I'm watching something. But when there's a lot of stuff happening on screen, I actually like it because it's not just like facts and then you're just watching like a boring screen, but it's, you know, it's quite funny as well. So it makes you want to watch it more. But yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. I knew some of these, but I didn't know all of them. When you said the highest peak in Europe, I was like, Everest. Then I was like, wait, Everest is not in Europe. Yeah. But yes, thank you guys for watching another video. Bye bye.